Hi again. Let's look at muscles of facial expression. So first slide are some general comments. Again, I've already mentioned they work together in groups. These are muscles that are in the scalp, eyes, or mouth to produce facial expressions. Origin is on most bones, and the insertion of most is in soft tissue fascia. And you only need to learn the origins and insertions of those muscles that are indicated in your objective sheet, the larger version that I'll pull up here in just a moment, and that are talked about. If I don't talk about the origin and insertion for a particular muscle, and it's not in the objective sheets, then you don't need to learn that. All of these muscles are innervated by the facial nerve. And the major branch that does this exits via the stylomastoid foramen, which hopefully you could all put a little pointer on if I gave you a skull. It's between the mastoid process and the styloid process. And I would encourage you to practice drawing these cartoon style. I'll give you some practice on how to get started. And I would also pay attention to the correct spelling of these names. That's important. So make some sketches of the muscles and then label them. So before we jump into just a couple of slides of these muscles, let me bring up the objective sheet, which is what's posted on Canvas. So I believe this is the second page. We just finished this SCM and the trapezius. So everything on these objective sheets I would like you to know. So you notice, for example, under the SCM, there are the details of the origin, which we talked about, the insertion, the action, and I didn't talk about it then, but here it is now, the innervation. So which nerve innervates the sternocleidomastoid? This is going to be a somatic motor pathway to the voluntary SCM. So that would be cranial nerve number 11, which is the accessory. And it's the same nerve that does the trapezius. So you want to learn what's in these objective sheets. Okay, so we just finished the cervical muscles and we're starting the muscles of facial expression. Here are the comments that I basically just went through in the slide. Here is the list of the muscles that you need to learn. And you need to be able to identify them. If I gave you a picture, you need to be able to discuss their action, at least say something about it. And if indicated, the origin and insertion, which it doesn't look like I have origin and insertion for any of those muscles. So that's good. But you know that the insertion is what moves. So if we're talking about a smiling muscle, for example, well, when the face changes and the smile occurs, the corners of the mouth are pulled back and up. So you can kind of put something together for the smiling muscle. So at any rate, that's the list. So you need to be able to identify those and remember that all of those are innervated by the facial nerve, cranial nerve number 7, and that branch of 7 exits by the stylomastoid foramen behind the ear. It radiates out through the parotid salivary gland like a fan and just hits all of these muscles of the face. But we'll go through more of that with the nervous system. So right now, all you need to remember is cranial nerve 7 through the stylomastoid foramen, and we're good. So let's go to some pictures. So you have that list in front of you. Keep that. Here is a pretty good figure. It's out of a different text. Study the blue box. It says study all of the muscles identified with a bold leader line. So these are the bold leader lines, the darker black ones, marking in red. Those are the muscles that you need to identify. It's on your list. And I hope that you can enlarge this figure enough to where you can clearly identify these muscles. So for example, here is the Zygomaticus Minor and the Zygomaticus Major. They're both on your list. And they're both smiling muscles. Now, two different artists who draw these muscles are going to draw them a little bit different. And that's okay. And they go to the lips. So the Zygomaticus Major is the larger one. Zygomaticus Minor is on top. So you're going to have to spend some time with these. I don't think it's all that effective for me to just tell you what you can figure out on your own. You need to be able to identify it and tell me what it does. For example, here is the Levator, Anguli, Oris. It's this muscle. Goes right to there. So I tried to key in on the name indicating function, location. So this is Levator. So what does Levator mean? Well, it's going to elevate. Elevate, Levator. So it's going to pull the corners of the mouth upward. Okay? And Anguli, Oris. So Oris is referring to the mouth. And here's the angle off of the edge. So Levator, Anguli, Oris. Not all of the muscles are intuitive like that. Rhizorius doesn't really tell me much of where it is or what it does. But again, you need to be able to identify it. It attaches to the corners of the mouth, and those fibers run posteriorly. So it retracts the corners of the mouth, pulls them back, sort of as a grimace. Here's another one, the Depressor, Anguli, Horus. So where would you go looking for it? Well, it's going to be pulling, it's going to be depressing the corners of the mouth downward. So it's all of this muscle. And its action, of course, is going to be to pull, to depress. Okay. Then there's the Depressor Labiai, Horus. It depresses the lips. It's the Depressor Labiai Inferioris. It's below. So it's originating, or inserting rather, all along the lower lip. Fibers run down onto the mandible. But again, I'm not asking you for origins and insertions. I just want you to be able to identify it, look at a picture, identify it, and tell me what it does. Depresses the lips. The Orbicularis muscles are round, orb equals circle. So here are muscles that run in circles. So there is an Orbicularis oculi, oculi for eye, the Orbicularis oculi, and we also have an Orbicularis oris. Just runs around like this. Allows you to make fish lips. Some of these muscles have been cut on the left side of the figure to show deeper muscles, and the right side of the skull is showing more of the superficial muscles. So again, all of these muscles that have the black leader line associated with them. The depressor labii inferioris, we already did on the left side of the figure, but there it is again on the right side. I didn't put a black leader line on it because I already did it for the other one. So, I'm not going to show you pictures of where the muscles have been cut. I would be giving you a picture with them uncut. It's easier. Okay? So, there the Zygomaticus Major and Minor again, and you just need to be able to go through this and identify them. So the Levator Labiai Superioris, on both sides. One side showing a cut on the right, the left side of the skull, anatomical position. So the Levator Labiai is going to be elevating the lips. So it's going to be pulling the lips upwards. So the names, all you have to do is focus on the names, understand a little bit about the terminology, like Levator is going to elevate, labii are for lips, etc. Okay? So you may want to enlarge this picture on your computer, zoom in if you have trouble reading the names of the muscles and text. Okay, next figure I think is more of same. Oh, a little bit of practice. So you can make up pictures like this if you have a little program on your phone. A lot of students use Quizlet. Snapchat, you can do make pictures and labels, whatever you want to do. There are a lot of programs. You can make flashcards out of, I think Quizlet allows you to make flashcards. I don't know if that's free or if there's a price with it, but there's a lot of free software out there too, if it helps. Otherwise, you just take pictures, photocopy them, black out the labels and or the names, and make up examples or problems like I did here. So here's a lateral view, muscles of facial expression, and you need to identify A. So for example, so here is your practice. Writing it out. A. It's the Orbicularis oculi. So you can go through that and practice that way. Okay, so the Zygomaticus muscles, the Zygomaticus Major and Minor, which are, well, let's do a few of these. So here's one. This is G, and here is F. So we have F and G. They're both going to the corners of the mouth. They're coming off of the zygoma, and they're going to be retracting the corners of the mouth. So F is the Zygomaticus minor. I would be studying the pictures and the review exercises at the end of your chapter for this unit. There are those sorts of practice problems at the end of the chapter. You wouldn't want to be surprised if you saw some of those problems copied over onto an exam. So I want you to practice that, and you should have no problem answering them. G is the Zygomaticus Major. Okay, how do I remember the major and the minor? Well, the major is larger, right? The minor is smaller. The larger is heavier and fell to the bottom. And the Zygomaticus Minor is smaller and floated to the top. So here is the Zygomaticus Major, ZM, heavy, fell to the bottom. Zygomaticus Minor, smaller, lighter, floated to the top. That's how my brain makes little connections to keep those straight, for example. Here's the Inferioris muscle again. I should be able to, again, give you a picture like this, and you should be able to identify J, etc. Okay? Couple of these muscles, let's go back to the previous slide, are a bit of a mouthful. Let's see, do I have those listed here? Yes. The Levator, I like this. Check out this long-winded name. The Levator Labiai, Superioris, Alicu Nasi. Boy, there's a challenge for the spelling test. All right, break the name down. The Levator Labii. What's it going to do? It's going to elevate the lips. Okay, so it's got to connect to the lips. Ala is referring to what? The wing of the nose, the flare of the nostrils, or the ala. And nasi for nose. So it's this muscle. And what's it going to do? It's going to raise the lips, right? So it's the Levator Labii Superioris, Alicu, watch the spelling, and nasi for nose. Here is one that's similar, the Levator Labii Superioris, which is this one. It's doing the same thing. They're all attaching down here. Okay? So, just takes practice. So, next slide, you saw, practice those, check your work. Any questions, let me know. Oh, the Buccinator. Yeah. So the figure on the left is showing a couple of things. All of this, these are going to be muscles of mastication. That one, and all of this. So all of this, all of these are muscles of mastication, which we're not talking about now, but they're sort of shown in context. The Buccinator muscle is this one, and it's deep. And I'm not going to ask you about the origins and insertions, but check this out. There is a connection for this muscle back here. It's not the one that's posterior to it, but this connection is the pterygomandibular raphe. So what do you think pterygo is referring to? When we're talking about bones. Pterygoid processes are hanging down right about where that yellow line is. I'm just trying to make some connections. Pterygoid processes. So when you see the names, you can kind of start figuring out, oh, that's the pterygomandibular raphe. And raphe is just sort of a web, a connection, like a belt holding these two things together. And here is an old image out of one of the earlier editions of Gray's Anatomy. And here is the Buccinator again. And here is this pterygomandibular raphe, drawn a little bit different. This is the idea. And the Buccinator is attaching to the maxilla. Again, I'm not going to ask you about origins and insertions, but it does connect to the mandible and the maxilla and this pterygomandibular raphe, or ligament raphe, and it forms the cheek. So and then it attaches to the corners of the mouth also. But at any rate, is, if you will, a more medial cheek muscle. So when you're chewing, the buccinator muscle will pooch out to the right or to the left, depending on which one, and the tongue is on the other side. So if these are your teeth, let's see if I can draw this. If these are your, let's pretend these are molars. And then here's an opposing mandibular molar. Oh, gee, you could do better with teeth. Yeah, let's just start over. Okay, and then you have the tongue over here. And then you have the buccinator over here. And your food gets pushed, your spinach, I guess, since it's green, gets pushed back and forth. The tongue pushes it one direction, and the buccinator pushes it the other direction. And you move that food back and forth across the grinding the occlusal surface of the teeth, and you grind up your food between those two muscles, positioning the food. Occasionally, you get the buccinator in between the teeth and you bite your cheek, or you get the tongue in between and you bite your tongue. That sort of thing can happen. So at any rate, that's the buccinator. Next slide, here you go. We're done with what I'm going to talk about for muscles of facial expression. At this point, the rest of it is up to you. But here is the practice. So get your list of muscles from the objective sheet and start sketching them in, and you can make out more copies of this or make up your own little alien face if you want. So looking at the list again, frontalis, and then you have your orbicularis oculi, etc. Okay, so the frontalis muscle. I would do something like this. That's good enough. Label it and spell it correctly. I'll abbreviate muscle, which you can do also if you like, with just a little M period. There you go. And then you could do the orbicularis oculi. Done. Good enough. Right? So what would you call this muscle? Something like that. So draw those muscles in, label them, and practice. Okay? And then let me know if you have problems. Test each other. Let's see, we have a couple muscles that run down like this. No, that's good enough for artwork. Doesn't have to be pretty. And then we have another one that sort of runs out this direction. So identify those and do the rest of them. Okay? So, that'll keep you busy for a little while. Practice the spelling. And I think I've given you enough guidance on how to approach the muscles of facial expression. Which nerve innervates this Zygomaticus Major? Which nerve innervates the Depressor Anguli Oris? Practice that until you can just rattle it off and you're not fazed by it. All muscles of facial expression are the facial nerve. Okay, that's all for now. We will come back and go through the muscles of mastication next. That's a little bit more involved. So, see you soon. Bye.